And then we're looking at this one here,
Okay.
going on to.
All right, thanks. Today we're here in, well, not in the home of, that's from back when I used to go into all the homes. And we're here with Erv Wegscheid, and he's going to speak with us about his time serving in the military, serving our country. And Erv, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, we finally made it. Okay.
Well, Erv, I always like to learn just a little bit about a person before they went into the
Okay.
service. You know, and you mentioned you were born.
We were born on a farm about 1.5 miles west of Bluffton. And our farm was right by the railroad tracks, Northern Pacific. And it was during World War II, so I seen a lot of troop trains going through. We seen a lot of trains full of military equipment, you know, army tanks and jeeps and trucks and stuff like that. And we also seen a lot of airplanes coming over from the west coast going east. And everything in the trains were going west. I suppose the airplanes were being built in the west coast. And at the time I didn't know it, but all these airplanes that were being ferried to the east coast were being flown by women. And I didn't know that at the time, but
If you had, you would have ducked. Is that
Well,
it?
no.
The mentality back then.
I remember at Christmas time I got a book on airplanes, and I could recognize every airplane that was World War II
Really?
that was flying by, and so it's kind of interesting. And I imagine it was called brain kind of. We were. My mind went dead.
That's cool.
Brainwashed somewhat. We were very patriotic, and we were, there's a lot of posters around. Every post office had a poster. In school, I went to parochial school, but we always started off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and always end up with God Bless America, or there's a lot of patriotism. So when I was in a church, I remember in our church we had a large, kind of like a star for every soldier that was from Bluffton that was in the military. It was blue stars, and then once in a while they would be changed to gold. That was when somebody had gotten killed. I don't remember how many it was, but it also in the windows of homes there was little people had little stars if they had one person in the service, and I know 2 families that had 5. There was in the little town of Bluffton. One was my cousin, and one was in the Cookfors in Bluffton. They had 5 boys. So that was kind of as I was raised. And I remember during World War II, we went through a lot of the, at the museum, I volunteered at the museum. We go talk about the home front. We went through rationing. We went through, on a farm, sugar was the most important. We were always out of sugar. Flour, you get a lot of flour. We had a lot of meat because we had on the farm a lot of vegetables and fruits and stuff like that. But tires were rationed, gasoline. We were allowed 3 gallons of gas a week, and we farmed with horses. We didn't have a tractor. We had a tractor, but it didn't run. It didn't run until after the war, and then we finally got it when the gas was back, plentiful. And it was a lot of things that the home front kind of had to endure because of World War II. And then when I was junior in high school, that's when the Korean War broke out, and I knew I'd be going into service. And I enlisted in the Army right out of high school. And it was, the Korean War was still going on. And on my record is I'm a Korean War / peacetime veteran. I didn't go over to Korea, but I went over to Germany. And I remember I left Perm, Minnesota. My dad took me up. There was a whole busload of us. We left from Perm, the city hall, and we went to Fort Knox, Kentucky. Fort Riley, Kansas, where we went to our basic training, 8 weeks. I found out that I thought maybe for a while I made a mistake because they were kind of rough on us. Because most of the cadre in basic training were Korean vets, and they were pretty tough on us. After basic, usually you would go to some type of school or advanced basic. I did very well in mechanics. I studied mechanics, engines and so forth, and they sent me to wheel mechanics school and work on Jeeps and deuce and halves and 3/4 tons. They were the most important vehicles that were around at the time.
Did you say wheel mechanics school?
Wheel mechanics, wheel. It was track mechanics.
Yes, that's what I wondered.
Wheel
Okay.
mechanics.
Yep.
And I was always taught on the farm and when I was going to school to do the best you could. And I became, I was one of the top in the class, so they sent me to Fort Knox to track school. And I went into Army tanks. And it was kind of, the Army tanks were quite easy to work on. They trained us in World War II tanks mostly. The Sherman tanks and M24s, because they knew in Korea, the Korean War was still going on, that the Sherman was over there, and in Germany there was Sherman tanks, the M4s were popular over there. And those tanks, when they were being built, nobody could supply the one type of engine. There was Ford engines, there was Continentals engines, and there was also aircraft engines and radio engines and
In the tanks?
in the tanks. And so I ended up going to Germany, and we got over there, and before we got to Germany, we got into New York, and I was never out of the state of Minnesota. Before I got to Kansas, and then to Fort Knox, and then in between time I got a furlough, but New York, and the first thing we were told to go to the U.S. office. They had a club, a USO club, and they had free tours of New York, and they toured us to the Statue of Liberty, and all these, Coney Island was in the spring, and we seen the Empire State Building. There's, if you want to see a bunch of farm boys looking up in the building, we seen a lot in New York. They really took care of us. I spent 3 days there, and then we got on a ship, the U.S. Buckner, and the U.S. Buckner had the top deck was dependents of officers. There were civilians, and there were wives and kids, and the lower decks were all troops. So for some reason, they said, you're going to work on KP in the top deck. Well, it turned out to be, it was the best thing that ever happened. We had good food, because they were fed much better than the soldiers. We had breakfast, dinner, and supper up there. And the first time I seen a shrimp, in Minnesota, they had a big bucket of shrimp. They sat down and told us to clean it. We how do you clean a shrimp, you know? It was a whole new different world. But I enjoyed going over there on a boat. And then at the end of the day, everything that wasn't eaten, the GIs or anything in the freezer, we had to throw over the deck, over in the ocean. And I remember we asked the head cook if we could take the apples and oranges and the fruit down to the troops, and they said yes. And we took that down to the troops on the lower deck. And every night, instead of throwing those overboard, we would take them down to the troops, and they would eat the apples and stuff. It took us like 7 or 8 days in Germany, to get to Germany. We came into Bremerhaven. It was a port, it's still a big seaport. And we were told that in Germany, when we got over there, that would be a lot of destroyed buildings yet. This was 1952, 53. It was like 7, 8 years after World War II, and we got into Bremerhaven, and half of the port was damaged yet, and there was some places where ships could come in. They loaded us in a train. They took us to Kaiserslautern, which was a little town, and they had a big camp there, and that's where it was kind of a clearinghouse to, if someone needed someone in a particular area in Germany, there's camps all over Germany, they would tell them. And I was there for 2-3 days, and the first thing we got there, they took away all our money. And they gave us military script. We had to have monopoly money. It was like play money. I should have brought some. I still have some at home, $1. I think it was the dollar bills and the change we could have. And they told us that they didn't want the dollars to fall into the enemy's hands. And talking about the military script, they would change it about every 6-8 months. They would call all the troops together, and they would, if anybody was on pass, they would have a chance to change it when they got back. But they would change all the military script all over Europe at one time. But from there, I went to Nuremberg, Germany. We was in a big camp. It was an old SS camp, and it was all 6-foot brick walls, and I was in the motor pool, and in the motor pool there was escape hatches to tunnels that tunneled out to the outside the city, and we weren't allowed to get into the tunnels, but we did climb down there, and there's flashlights and stuff. It looked kind of scary down there, so we didn't wander too far. But when I was thinking I would be getting into a tank outfit, and I got into an artillery outfit. And it was the same as a Sherman tank, but it was a 107 howitzer. It was the chassis of a Sherman tank, and had a howitzer, 105 howitzer on it. And his top was open, not like a tank. So it was the same tank, and I was assigned to the motor pool. And again, like I was taught to give good day's work for, and I was in the office, and I had to take care of work orders and all the parts and stuff. And the first sergeant was never, the motor sergeant was never there. He was never there. And so I kind of took over the motor pool, and so I made corporal right real fast because the motor sergeant wasn't there. And then he left, and we got another motor sergeant, and he was biding his time, and he was never there. And so it wasn't very long after that I made sergeant. So 3 years I made a sergeant. But in Germany there was, we did a lot of training. Grafenwehr was a big training center. And they would ship the tanks to the area, the training center, by train, but all the trucks would drive there. And we would spend 2 or 3 weeks at a time at Grafenwehr training. And in the motor pool, we wouldn't have too much work to do because if something broke down, we had to fix it. And we didn't have a lot to training as far as weapons and so forth. But we did do a lot of training, and we would come back. And another thing that happened over there, they had alerts. An alert would be called in the middle of the night to someplace, and we would have a rendezvous in outside of Nuremberg, and we would have to have about half an hour to get there, and we didn't know if it was a real thing or if it was just a false alarm, and it was always false alarm. Well, we didn't know that because there was a lot of stuff going on over there. Just before I got over there, it was a Marshall Plan, if you remember. The blockade Berlin. In order to get to Berlin, you had to go through East Germany to get there. And they had a train, a rail train, and a highway, and they blocked it off, and they had to fly everything into them. They had to fly the fuel, the food, everything into them. Well, a little bit about Germany. Germany was divided in 4 parts after World War II: England, France, United States, and Russia. And the 3 parts of England, France, United States, that was all okay, but the other part, the east part, that was the communist. So we weren't allowed in East Germany or East Berlin. We could get to Berlin by train. A bunch of us guys took a train one time. We couldn't get off the train until we got to Berlin. And when we got to Berlin, we went to where the road was. They didn't have the big wall up there yet, but they had a big fence, barbed wire fence, and you couldn't go into East Berlin. That bothered me. And then we would have to take our turn to guard the between East Berlin and East Germany and the West. We'd have to take our turn to guard that area, and they would patrol along the border, and it was barbed wire fences and so forth. And on the other side, it would be either Russian or German troops, not German, Russian troops. I imagine there were some East German troops too.
When you said that would bother me with regard to that you couldn't go into East Germany, explain a little bit more about what that meant to you.
Well, both my grandparents were from Germany, and some of my uncles were also from Germany. They were from East Germany. My mother's cousin was from not too far from Nuremberg, and I visited them, and I got to know a lot about World War II and about what they went through. They had a daughter that was my age, and she had one leg shot off and had one a bullet through the other knee, so she had a hard time getting around. So they had a lot of scars from World War II, and her dad was in the German army. There was kind of 2 or 3 tiers in the German army. There was the Nazis, and they went to school when they were young, and they were trained to be SS. But the rest of the people were drafted just like we were, and they were glad when the war was over. They were glad to get back. And he worked for the post office, and he was real happy that we got rid of Hitler. And
So when you said that bothered me that you couldn't go into East Berlin, was that you couldn't go see relatives there, or just that you had relatives there that you knew were not free?
just they weren't free, you know.
Yeah.
It's the same way in Berlin. You could get to across the street. That part was off limits, and it just. And that really didn't change until '91. And that went that long when Germany was unified. And they were about a generation behind everybody, behind the West Germans. In training, something happened in training that was they had multitasks. They wanted us to learn more in one job. So they wanted the guys from the motor pool to know how to fire a howitzer, a 105 howitzer. And we were going through the training and so forth to be able to, in case of emergency, we could step in to be commander of a tank or a gunner or a loader or something. And 105 howitzer it's about a 4.5 inch cartridge, and it's about 40, 50 pounds. And they had a powder. They had an extra powder that you could put into it to get a little more distance. They would go 6 to 7 miles, and if you wanted to go 8 or 9 miles, you could an extra powder pack. And one day we were training, and we had a powder pack go off on us. And there was 2 guys that were killed immediately, and my best friend ended up in the hospital. Well, we all ended up in the hospital, and excuse me.
No, that's completely understandable.
Anyway, I had a concussion, and I had my ears are damaged, and I went to see my friend in the hospital, and he passed away. So they always had, if someone was killed in training or something, they had they always had someone escort the body home. So I asked for that job. And I escorted to Camden, New Jersey. And he had a 6-month-old daughter. I spent 3 days there, and then I flew back to Germany. So it was peacetime, but it was also a hard time for some of the troops. There was a lot of training. A lot of people killed in training for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't have the safety like they have today. But an article I gave you today, there was 200-300 a year killed in Germany alone every year just in training.
I didn't realize that.
And I think it was in a 10-year period, it was 2,300 in Germany alone, just in training, or missed death some way. And maybe it was some other ways too. I don't know how. But anyway, after that, I took service a little more serious. And like I said, I worked in Woodpool and I became a motor sergeant. And our job was to keep the tanks rolling and keep the jeeps going and do halves. We had 2 little lousy half tracks. There were lots of most people. Lousiest piece of equipment we ever saw. We could never keep it running. But there was something else that we had to keep about 4 or 5 vehicles going for a special task force, and I never knew what they did. They would leave in the morning or leave at night, and I had no idea what they were doing. They were part of the MPs. I don't know.
Technically.
They didn't tell us.
Right.
But if they had a Jeep that was broken down, we had to make sure they had another Jeep for the next day. Take it away from somebody.
Did any of the vehicles ever come back with any damage or anything that would give you a clue as to anything? Kind of thing?
No idea.
Yeah.
No idea. You hear rumors and stuff, and you just
Didn't know what was true and what wasn't. But.
So
What were some of the rumors? And on record, we do not know this was true, but yeah.
One was we did know that some of the old SS, in some areas where we were off limits to the GIs, they were still kind of gunning for the American troops, and we had troops that got in trouble in some areas. They got into a restricted area. And I heard one time that they would go and take these guys out some way, or if I know for a fact that the German people would call American troops if they had problems with someone, and we would go in, they would go in. And so that's things that I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm sure that 7, 8 years after World War II, and these guys were born and raised in this environment, and they had youth camps, and
They were just totally indoctrinated.
yeah, and I imagine a lot of that was going on.
They may have actually been involved in, well, cleanup or mopping up or I can't, imprisonment, whatever, you know, war criminals that had not come to justice too, you know?
We did see where the Nuremberg trials were held in Nuremberg. And then our company moved from Nuremberg to a little bitty town of Ansbach, Germany. And I liked that little town. It was, every little town had an army camp. And it was, we were in, German army tank, or army camps. So every little town. And Ansbach was a nice little town. It was probably, I couldn't say, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people. And it was a nice little town. In Germany, it was all work. They had Innsbruck and Innsbruck, Austria. They had a big hotel that was GIs could go to. And I remember it was $1 a night on the lake and 75 cents if you looked at the mountains in the back. And I didn't have a lot of money, and I had the room in the back so I could see the mountains, Innsbruck, Austria. And it was a real nice, and it was supposed to have been a big hotel for the German army. And the United States took it over, and we toured Austria quite a bit. We had a lot of, the Nazis didn't have a lot of camps way up in the mountains, and they took us up there and showed us where they were at.
Just to clarify, and I know obviously times were different then, I mean the value of money was different, but 25 cents would have made a difference to you in that way? I mean, the difference in the rooms made a difference to the people were plenty, yeah.
At the time, I was, I remember I went, first time I went to Innsbruck, I think I was a corporal, and I was probably making $80 a month, and 50 of it went home.
Yeah.
And I smoked.
Oh, okay.
And so I didn't have a lot of money to just, although in Germany for $10 you could just about buy anything. Not today, but for I mean for $5 you could have a good time for $5. You could have a good meal. You could have a few beers. For $5.
Yeah, wow.
One thing,
Now you can't buy a beer for that.
the German beer was good, and it was strong. And when I was talking before, I visited my mother's cousins over there, and they came to visit me in Nuremberg, and then after a while they were in a little town of Mark Twigwick's, and I took a train to there and visited their home quite often. And they would, on a Sunday, they would go to church, and then they would walk up to the pub or the guest house and spend the rest of the day there. They would drink beer, and they would sing and have good food, and and I liked it because there was no GIs around.
This was real Germany.
It was real German, and I would be in my civilian clothes, and most people didn't know I was a GI. But I did enjoy that part with my cousins, and I didn't do as much as a follow-up letters after I left, but I should have. But the one girl who had her one leg shot after the war, she never married. But the other two children did. They both had good jobs.
Have you ever thought about seeing if they're still around and trying to contact them still yet?
I have a cousin of mine who's a nun in Little Falls. She writes to the family,
She does.
and so I know about the family from through her,
Uh-huh.
and I know how to get to them.
You should write them a letter and tell them exactly what you told me. How much you enjoyed that.
I did. They were good. They were nice people. And like I say, he was in the German army, but he was so glad it was over. But I remember after the war, back home in the little town of Bluffton, we sent care packages over to these people. They had nothing. They had a two-bedroom apartment that we were living in. They had 3 children, you know, and they had a home before the war.
And you don't raise a vegetable garden in a 2-bedroom apartment.
And in Germany, in Nuremberg, I would say only half of the town was rebuilt when I was there. There was blocks after blocks that were just roped off yet. That wasn't rebuilt. And they were building a block after it, you know, just trying to rebuild it.
You're in Ansbach still at this, I mean, in the story so far? Now, did you move on to other parts from Ansbach?
Oh, yeah. We, I went to Paris. We took a train. The people from France were very arrogant.
Even at that time, I'm surprised, because, you know, that
You'd be on a train and
Uh-huh.
you're very, you know, this was 6, 7, 8 years after the war, and they were a whole different type of people, and I liked Paris, but I really didn't enjoy my time over there. And then I went to England, and they were completely different. And there in England, they had a lot of damage in World War II.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a lot of, especially in London, that wasn't rebuilt when I was there.
Oh.
And this was 79 years after. They could,
I'm just surprised with the English, you'd think, you know.
they built as fast as they could.
Yeah,
I suppose,
sure,
with the
yeah.
contractors,
Yeah,
and they had a lot of people that got killed.
yeah, that's true.
And a lot of their help.
I've got some glare coming off of the
I
glasses.
was wondering.
So I'm wondering if we can take your
Are you okay without them, or not
if we
really?
go up with them, then we don't have as much of a glare. I mean, just up half an inch off of your ears, like you started doing there,
Okay.
like that. Otherwise, are you used to wearing them?
No, that's fine.
That's certainly better.
Okay, and if they slip down again, just go like that, and maybe he can remember to
Yeah.
push him up.
It
Yeah.
just they're kind of angled right up towards the light there,
Yeah.
so I think that should be
Okay.
better.
All right.
Very good.
Were you stationed additional places after Ansbach, or?
No, I stayed there for my duration of I spent 19 months over in Germany. It was a good experience. It was one bad moment I had, but the rest was a good experience. I'd seen how different people lived, and at the time they had nothing. They lost everything, German people, and you could. When you had a carton of cigarettes, you could just about get anything with a carton of cigarettes. This was 8 years after the war. So it took a long time for them to rebuild.
Not to take you back to the uncomfortable place, but just as a matter of record, I would like to ask your best friend's name, so his name's on our tape, if that would be all right.
Robert Donald.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we don't need to go back for any more than that, but just as a way of honoring him, I'd like his name on the tape. So.
He never seen his daughter. I can just imagine someone who been in combat and seen this day after day after day after day. You know, I don't know how they could go through with something like that.
Well, and that was so out of the clear blue. I mean, just so unexpected too.
But one thing about the VA, they've been good to me as far as hearing aids. And, they call it service-connected disability, and they take care of that.
That's good,
Um,
and they should.
And I haven't had any qualms about the VA. They've been good.
That's good. It's good to hear, because I get real angry if I hear about things going on where the veterans aren't being taken care of, you know, so.
I think a lot of, maybe one person might have a bad experience.
And then it gets blown out of proportion.
And I know, I was in the waiting room here 6 months ago, and one guy was just raising all kinds of cane, you know, about this and about that. And he sounded like a troublemaker, and this is the type of people who give the VA a bad name.
Yeah.
They go out of their way to help the GI coming back, especially the combat veterans. You know, World War II, and they didn't at first, but after a while, they were giving the combat veterans a lot of help. And we do have I volunteer at the museum,
Right.
and every other Thursday, will be this Thursday, we have a combat support group, and we have.
I am so glad to hear that. I did not know about that, because I was trying to put some I, of course, as an interviewer, run across veterans that are still experiencing problems from them, and understandably so, and I've tried to put them in contact with things
We
that
have,
didn't know about it.
they come in every other Thursday, and they spend all afternoon in there, and they have someone come in from the VA.
And this is right at ITO?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how I'm on the board of directors, I should know this, but I'm so overjoyed to hear that. Wow. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And they have a World War II veteran, and they have a Korean veteran, and they have a Desert Storm veteran, and all the rest of the Vietnam veterans. And in the summertime, they meet out at Palmville Park out by the lake. And they're a bunch of good guys.
I'm gonna make one more change while we got a little. Can I have you stand up for just a minute? I'm gonna just angle this away, and that's really gonna help our cause a little bit.
Yep, that way.
Let's see how now. Let's see what we're looking at.
Should I scoot my chair over a little, because if he's still looking at me, I'll be at the same place, but.
Yeah, you can come on over.
Gotta get my mug in there, son.
That's good. All right, I feel a lot better about that
Yep.
now, especially if you when he looks towards the
Yeah,
light,
yeah.
then I'm getting really the glare. So I think
Well,
we're,
feel free to signal me
we're looking a lot better
mid-camera
there.
even
Very good.
if you need to do something like that, because that's
Ask
important.
more questions.
Sure. Oh, you've done an awesome job of just almost on autopilot. It's been wonderful. but-
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we gotta go up with the glasses still, with, you know, it's not in the front, it's right there. But if you, do you have to have your glasses on? It would be the best. Yeah, if you're used to wearing them,
I see a little blur there.
Yeah.
that's perfect, just right there. Thank you.
Am I blocking the camera? If I
Not
stick
at
my
all.
head over
Nope, you're
there?
good.
All right, good.
Okay, we're ready.
Jay, anything that came to your? He's done such an awesome job. It's
Absolutely.
made my job so easy. But
That was a good transition.
Yeah.
Nothing I could.
I'm just trying to think if there was. Well, what about coming back home?
We came back on another ship, and I was put down in a hole with all the troops, and I enjoyed. I don't know, I'm sure you heard about how these troop ships were. And they were 5 bunks high, and it was that much.
I hope you had the top bunk.
No, I didn't have. You had the middle bunk, and then you had your duffel bag sitting on the floor, but you would be pushed in there at night during the daytime. But coming back wasn't as nice as it was going over, because I was in that civilian mess hall, and I found out how they ate. They didn't eat quite as good as we did going over. But they had a lot of boiled food, and a lot of people got sick on the ship. A lot of GIs.
That's why I was hoping you had the top bunk.
Coming back wasn't too bad. It was just a plain old troop ship.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, the Buckner was going over, and I can't remember what the name of the ship was coming back. But we got again to New York, and I went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and that's where I got mustered out. And they took us to the bus depot, or however we were going to get home, and they made sure we got on a bus, and thank you, and that was it. And I got $100 a month for 3 months mustering out pay.
Okay.
I think when I was a sergeant, we were making about $135 a month. That was overseas pay, and that was.
That was good pay back then, I suppose. I mean, relatively.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, now.
I saved some money when
Yeah.
when I was in service. I didn't spend a lot of money, but we got in at Fort Sheridan, and I got in a bus, and I came all the way to Bluffton in the bus, and got off and walked a quarter of a mile from the driveway to home on a Sunday morning about 5 o'clock in the morning.
Were they expecting you? Did they
They
know?
knew I was
Yeah.
coming in.
Okay.
But I didn't know the bus driver. I asked him if he would drop me off. Well, they were gonna drop me off in Staples, which is about 25, 30 miles from home. And I asked him, could you drive me all the way to Bluffton and just get me off by the driveway? And that's what he did.
Really? Wow.
He probably wouldn't do that today.
Well, sure. Yeah, it could be, but yeah.
It was on a Sunday morning, and it was about
Yeah.
6, 8 people on the bus, and I walked across the railroad tracks and walked home. And the dog barked. He didn't know who it was.
If there was, I'm gonna throw out kind of a hypothetical question, just kind of but let's say someone knew you when you graduated from high school, and let's say this person is very observant, picks up on people real well, and kind of really knows who they are and what they're like and stuff. And then you come back from your service and are around them for a while. What would they say about the difference they saw in you when they returned?
They thought maybe I grew up a little bit. When I left, I had like my old cars, and chased around quite a bit, and went to dances and had fun. And how we grew up. And,
Do you think he would have said you have the same understanding of how different people live and the differences in the world?
I didn't know there was so much difference. And in Germany, the people were really, they were digging themselves out of a hole, you know, after really Hitler's regime for years and years, and all the damage that was done over there, physically and mentally. In Germany today, I imagine I wouldn't even recognize it.
Have you ever thought of going back over and visiting?
I have, and now I'm at the age now, I wouldn't do it. But I would like to go back.
What else do you think being in the service did for you?
Well, I think I settled down a little bit when I came back. I think a lot of, I'm glad I enlisted when I did, because everybody was drafted in those days. And I was out of the service when guys my age were just being called in. And a lot of people that were 21, 22, 23 years old, married, and they would be drafted, and they couldn't get car loans, they couldn't get home loans, because they knew they were going to be drafted. So I'm glad I got it over with. And like I said, I know some people that chummed around with the one that was a grade ahead of me. I was out when he was drafted. So.
Yeah, a much more opportune time of life to be pulled out of life when you've just graduated from high school.
I could have and should have used a GI Bill, which I didn't do. I got a job and I stayed with the company for a long time, not a long time, 10, 12 years, got married, and then I couldn't go back to school. And,
Oh, we all got our coulda, shoulda, wouldas, but
yeah,
well, you have really. I knew I was looking forward to this for a reason. It's been very interesting, informative. I learned some things I didn't know, which is after about 250 interviews, doesn't happen all that much. And thank you so much. Or anything more you want to add that I haven't thought about asking?
no, I just, I have seen a lot of interviews that you guys put together. I usually try to watch one a week at the museum. Some weeks I don't get to see one, but I do see a lot of them. And I try to get to World War II vet, out of the way first. And now I'm working on the Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
And we had some real good interviews. And I think I just don't volunteer at the museum. I also color guard for funerals.
Oh, okay.
And last year, the VFW firm had 26 funerals. I made 21 of them. And some you just can't make. You get a doctor.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have enough, usually, where you get, sometimes you're looking at a short-handed, we can do it really comfortable with 6, but we'd like to have 7, 8.
Yeah.
But the World War II veterans last year were really left us in firm area, a lot of them.
Oh, we're losing so many. I'm so glad. I'm so grateful that we were able to get the project going when we did.
There's some of them that I was color guard at their funeral, and I didn't see their interview. I would go back and I'd make sure I dig it out. and see it.
Neat.
And you gotta, I'm glad that somebody's preserving that history. That's a very important history.
Very important.
And we do have schools that go through the museum, and when they're in the 9th, 10th grade, they're in good age, they can kind of understand. When they're juniors and seniors, they kind of know it all. And then when they're younger than that, they're not ready to grasp,
Yeah.
to grab it yet.
Mhm.
And they do a good job down there. When they have an interview, they have a school come in. They have an answering question sheet, and give them all the answers,
Mhm.
and they take it home, and it gives them the answers to the questions, what a POW is, or a MIA, and a lot of these kids never had no idea what they are.
Yeah, unfortunately that hasn't, yeah. Mhm.
And then sometimes when we will explain to them the MIA and POW table, never
Mhm.
seen that at museum,
Mhm.
we'll explain that to them.
Mhm. Well, Irv, thanks for coming in,
Okay.
and also, thank you for service to your country.
Mhm.
And I mean that, thank you very much.
I don't know if it's, probably look kind of dorky, but,
What's that?
yeah, I look kind of dorky at times, but
Oh, come off it, this was a great interview, just.
I get kind of emotional about things.
You know, that's a good thing. I don't know what happened to our society or who got it out of whack. Emotions are a good, God-given, wonderful thing. And I appreciate a man that can have his emotions. So, and that's certainly understandable in that case.
Okay.
Thanks again.